Hi there, my name is Alyssa Delana, and the theory I chose to conduct my research paper on is the politeness theory. And that is just one of the many theories of communication. Politeness theory has been studied for over 40 years, and some well known scholars who have studied this theory of politeness theory are Brown and Levinson. To define politeness theory, one would say this from one scholar: to be polite means to face certain standards and meet specific societal expectations. As it is stated, the language etiquette is often named as language politeness. It can be considered that the phenomenon of politeness fits into the frames of the requirements of etiquette. And so, something I stated in my paper was that politeness has a lot to do with etiquette and just manners, body language. It has a lot more to do than just our speech and what we say to others. And so, along with that, when I was studying politeness theory, this topic of face kept coming up. And so, as I continued to my research, I learned what face was, and face is a framework that was also created and founded by Brown and Levinson, and I believe there was also another scholar, I believe by the name of Goffman, that had something to do with the framework of face. And so to define face, it is the public self-image that every member wants to claim for him or herself. And so this idea or this framework of face has 4 categories. The first one is bald on record, which are instances in which threat minimizing does not occur. The second one is positive politeness, meaning positive politeness strategies seek to minimize the threat to the hearer's positive face. And the third is negative politeness. Negative politeness can be called politeness as a strategy for self-protection. And lastly, the fourth one is off-record indirect strategy. This strategy is more indirect. The speaker does not impose on the hearer as a result. Face is not directly threatened. So your image, your face is not threatened through that category of face framework. And along with that, many scholars do not agree necessarily with Brown and Levinson's framework of face, simply because it's not universal to every culture. So those 4 categories, or even just the definition of face, is not appropriate or even effective in different countries. And so we'll talk about that in a second when we talk about cross-cultural communication. But a little bit more of a background on Brown and Levinson. One scholar states that Brown and Levinson's theory is considered by many scholars as the most influential work in politeness theory. So as I said, when you talk about politeness theory, Brown and Levinson have come up in all of my scholarly sources and whatnot. And like I said, they were the founders of the face framework. But along with that, and I think I mentioned this a little bit before, many scholars disagree with their framework because it's not universal to all forms of communication, especially cross-cultural communication. And so to go along with that, in other countries, it's critical to communicate appropriately through politeness theory. And as stated before in this video, it's not just about our language or what we say, but it's, the body language, the manners, the etiquette, all of that, the gestures, and all those different things that go into how we communicate with others. It's not just verbal communication. And I had the opportunity to live in Honduras for about 3 months a couple years ago, and I lived on an orphanage, and I was just able to welcome teams from the United States to Honduras, and they were able to serve in the community and all these great things. And I think so often people wanted to learn the language, and they thought that's how they were going to communicate effectively with, those who, were citizens of Honduras. And I quickly realized that, it's obviously helpful to know the language because there is that language barrier, But I remember there would be so many mornings I would walk into the orphanage where the house parents were, and they'd be making breakfast or whatever they were doing. And if I did not say hi in Spanish or just greet them, that would come off disrespectful on my end and they would be offended. And so that's just one simple example of how we can easily not allow our communication to be effective. Politeness theory that would be negative in regard to politeness theory and how we communicate politely and with etiquette. And so that was something for me where it's like, in the United States, you don't necessarily always get greeted. People ignore you all the time. But there, it's very disrespectful to not greet someone when you walk into their home or see them. And so with that, I also, a biblical worldview, Colossians 4:6 states, "Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person." And so I know that we mentioned that, politeness theory isn't all about the words we say, but kind of more of our actions as well. But I still think that this is a great scripture that just reminds us that no matter where we are, if we're across the world or in our backyard, that we are always called to represent Christ, and that's a command that's given to us in the Bible over and over again. And so just a quick reminder that we should always allow our speech to be gracious. And a quick concluding thought and statement by a scholar named Goldsmith is, if we are not polite enough, we could come off as rude and insensitive. But if we seem too polite, we might not get our point across, or our actions seem more face-threatening than it is. And so I don't know, where you stand with the FACE framework, and if you feel that that's an appropriate and effective way to effectively use politeness theory in your communication skills. But whether you do or not, it's just always great to be aware of how we're speaking to others and just our body language, whether that's, in just your tiny sphere of influence of friends and family, or in a, more professional career or background. So that's politeness theory. Thanks for your time and for watching, and have a good holiday.